The Turin Shroud has been one of history's greatest mysteries for centuries, but what if I told you that new evidence hidden in this sacred relic reveals surprising details about the true appearance of Jesus? Recent studies point to clear signs of braided hair, which could completely change how we envision him. Not only that, but the image on the shroud also reveals marks of the dental arcade, an impressive detail that confirms the authenticity of this relic in an unprecedented way. Get ready for a shocking and detailed analysis that could transform everything we know about the face of Christ. Stay tuned until the end, because these discoveries will amaze you. At the University of Milan, Professor Gian Pietro Farinato teaches orthodontics and leads a team of specialists. The professor conducted an autopsy of the Holy Shroud. The results of his work were published in the rich and intriguing book titled Autopsy of the Man of the Shroud. Forensic medicine had not yet said everything about the shroud, so we decided to apply the methods commonly used on bodies or corpses so that the police and the judge could act based on the medical legal report. The idea of conducting a deep anatomical study of the shroud dates back to about 3 years ago. Using photographs taken by Secondo Pia in 1898 and the findings of scholars who preceded us, obviously, the scene of the crime no longer exists. We investigated the crime only through the marks left on the corpse. The anatomy of the body was reconstructed by us with morphological data recorded on the cloth. We made a total and complete reconstruction of the face. And sir, the professor went on to describe his fascinating work. Practically, we treated the image of the shroud as the forensic mask that is usually assembled to describe the wounds on the body, alive or dead. My colleague Alessandra Majorana and I explored the imprints, making them more readable to examine them better. Medically, with the most innovative image management software available, we changed the right-left orientation, the light and dark. Then, we applied the methods used to make CT scans, MRI, and other three-dimensional exams legible for a complete forensic dental diagnosis. In a field where sophistication and precision reach the tiniest details, what might seem like science fiction, for Farinato, is a scientific method, not a movie, capable of highlighting details that led his team to very precise measurements. When asked if, by studying an image on a cloth worn by centuries, one could analyze the face as if it were a flesh and blood cadaver, the professor replied that it was like being in front of a patient who is about to undergo orthodontic or surgical corrective therapy, such as bridges, dental implants, maxillofacial operations, things of that nature. For the face studied using the application, for the first time, of scientific methods like cranial cephalometry, which highlights the structural alterations present in the man of the shroud, the data obtained with asymmetry in the frontal sinuses, in the zygomatic bone, deviation of the nasal septum, and asymmetry of the jaw, with a displacement attributable to traumas occurring shortly before death. The question of what science says about the man of the shroud, which is the subject of an ancient, sometimes vehement, dispute, Professor Farinato responds that science says it is an impression left by the corpse of a man who was truly subjected, before dying, to tortures, flagellations, and beatings, the crown of thorns, and finally, crucifixion. This determined the death of that man, with a total correspondence to the narratives of the Gospels, even in the sequence of the time when the tortures were inflicted. Even the nature of the spear thrust post-mortem, according to the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 33 to 34. The professor also reported that scientific studies carried out in March 2015, coordinated by Professor Giulio Fanti and processed by the University of Padua, using 3 chemical and mechanical dating methods, led to a new dating of the cloth between 283 BC and 217 AD, a period compatible with the life of Jesus in Palestine. But the mode of image formation remains an unsolvable mystery. When asked if it was Jesus, he replied that, with the Spirit, a person of faith cannot ask science questions to which science cannot give answers. For her part, Professor Alessandra Majorana, of the University of Brescia, in statements to the specialized site Orthodontics 3D, explained that this was the first analysis of the Holy Shroud from a morphological and traumatic point of view, using state-of-the-art software. From our research, new, unique, and unexpected parameters and data on the type of trauma resulted. The dental examinations focused on the soft tissues and the skeletal structure of the face. From the dental point of view, the young man imprinted on the shroud had a complete set of teeth. The cephalometric measurements revealed a jaw severely deviated to the left, very likely as a result of the blows before the crucifixion. According to Professor Majorana, the work did not take into consideration the religious narrative, but in a passage from the Gospel of John, which recounts the hours leading up to the crucifixion, it mentions the blows to Jesus's face with a rod. In reality, in the Aramaic original, it speaks of a blow with a blunt object, compatible with the heavy trauma evidenced by our analysis. She also noted other consequences of the blows, such as the fracture of the nasal cartilage, trauma also confirmed by the analysis of the image graphically processed to isolate the marks of organic fluids like blood and sweat. From the processed image, there are no signs of nasal bleeding, so it can be assumed that the fracture occurred at least a couple of hours before death, concluded the specialist. Finally, let us remember that the corpse of the Holy Shroud is completely naked. Let's look now at the blood images. Experimentation has proven to me that they all strictly conform to reality. The scourge wounds have a realism, an abundance, a conformity to archaeological data. The hemorrhages from the crown of thorns and the clots formed by them are of unimaginable veracity. The suffering of the cross left traces perfectly conform to the observations of many medical scholars. The anatomy, therefore, bears witness to the authenticity, in full agreement with the Gospel texts. Another relevant point is that, unlike what would be expected in a conventional image, the hair on the shroud appears to be floating downward rather than sprawling sideways. This suggests that the hair was tied and maintained its structure even when the body was placed on the cloth. The hypothesis that Jesus wore his hair in braids gains strength from the detailed analysis of the Turin shroud, Jewish traditions of the time, and the forensic evidence of the image. Although there is no definitive conclusion, studies indicate that the capillary disposition present in the shroud is compatible with the use of braids or some form of binding. If this discovery were confirmed, it could not only add another historical element to the figure of Jesus, but also modify the way his image has been represented throughout history. The image on the shroud shows a man of about 1.80 meters with evident signs of torture and crucifixion. One of the most notable aspects is the hair's disposition, which falls symmetrically to the sides of the face and appears to be organized in well-defined strands, contrary to what would be expected from loose and disheveled hair after a brutal execution. The image suggests that the strands were tied in a structured manner, possibly in braids. The biblical archaeologist and iconographer Ian Wilson argues that the hair's appearance in the shroud image is consistent with the typical hairstyle of first-century Jews, especially Nazarenes and rabbis, who often wore braids as a symbol of religious consecration. This hairstyle can be seen in ancient coins and representations of Jews from the Second Temple period. The Torah mentions the importance of hair to certain Jewish groups. Nazarenes, for example, were individuals who took religious vows and did not cut their hair, Numbers chapter 6 verse 5. Although Jesus is not explicitly described as a Nazarite, the presence of braids in the shroud could indicate a similar practice or at least conformity with the Jewish customs of the time. Additionally, rabbinic texts suggest that Jewish men often braided their hair. The hair's arrangement on the shroud suggests it was tied. The symmetry and the organized form of the strands are not compatible with loose hair, as would be expected after crucifixion. Moreover, some studies indicate the presence of vertical lines that may suggest interwoven threads. We possess, then, the shroud of Jesus Christ, with the image of his body and the traces of his blood. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring the mysteries that connect history and faith, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to not miss any content. Remember that there is another interesting video waiting for you now on the screen. See you next time, and remember that knowledge illuminates our faith and helps us understand the true mysteries of humanity.